I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, to present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So, this reflection, would disregard the apostrophes. This reflection is about taking maybe some of the things that we've discussed and encountered and done in the last 24-ish hours, 30 hours or so, and allowing it to transform us, to allow it in a way, and allow the action of God and the Holy Spirit through our own cooperation and our own reflection, to then turn our life into an apostolate itself, right? And that's what I mean, I guess, when I say by liturgy, and I'll explain that in a minute. But Paul already hints at that here, right? That our life is a living sacrifice, right? It is something offered up to God. And I hinted that a little bit about that last night when I mentioned that we all kind of live for worship. We all live in a state of progress or state of pilgrimage. We're not made perfectly, but we're made to orient ourselves and all of creation towards that perfection. And I thought it was really beautiful what Juan Andres shared last night too. He said, right, there's this, or was it? Yeah, it was last night, where he said, I have this encounter, this experience with something perfect, and it draws me in, right? And it's another way to describe that same path to beauty that we were discussing, right? Is the experience of being drawn in, bless you, and allow ourselves, and not only that, but to offer ourselves, and this is kind of, there's different elements of our conversation earlier in this, to offer ourselves, to sacrifice ourselves, and to put our own identity on the line here, and to kind of take on a new identity, which is that perfect thing that we're orienting towards, right? And it doesn't imply, again, we'll get into all the details of this, maybe in the conversation we can, it doesn't imply a loss of ourself, but it doesn't imply a reorientation of who we are. So that's really what I wanted to talk about now. And how, just some kind of disparate thoughts, just kind of some lily pad thoughts on this very large topic of how we can do that. We do that, and maybe in Kratz, or how I've done it in my life, or kind of quotes or things that have kind of embodied that for me, right? So I think this is really at the essence of what we're trying to do is, embody this thing that's attractive and beautiful. I was really appreciative of our conversation, our spontaneous one earlier, right? Because we're struggling with this, right? All of us are having, actually, it got me really thinking hard, and that's why I kind of went off. I hiked up the mountain. I just had to clear my mind, because it's challenging stuff, right? We're trying to draw people into the perfection and the love of God that has so transformed our life that we want them to participate in that too, but there's so many obstacles in the way for many people and for ourselves, and it's a mess, right? And our own lives aren't in order, and are we the perfect people to be sharing this or not? And so all these questions kind of flood our minds, and so maybe we need some planks here to walk over some of the pitfalls that we might fall into. So that's why I like this passage from Romans, right? Our goal is to orient, to sacrifice ourselves in a way, to orient ourselves towards worship. And that's what we're doing through all of this. So I have some text here that we'll go through. But I just want to kind of open the floor with that famous quote, which is misquoted, from St. Francis, right? You guys have all heard the phrase, preach the gospel, use words if necessary. Never said by St. Francis, but it sounds nice. But it's true. In a sense, it's true. But we'll get into that right here. So the closest that it comes as in the Franciscan heritage is in the Franciscan Rule of 1221. I don't know if you guys know the whole miraculous story of how he wrote the rule, but he went up onto a mountaintop to pray. The brothers asked him for some rules and regulations of how to live their life. So he went up for like he did up this mountain in central Italy to pray. And he wrote this rule down, which is really divinely inspired in many ways. And he said an angel kind of helped dictate it to him. And he comes down, and it's too hard. It's way too hard. And so the brothers reject it. And he's distraught and confused because he asked for this abject poverty, this complete poverty. And anyway, long story short, he goes back up the mountain and kind of asks God to soften some of the rules, just a little bit. And he writes the rule of 1221, which is the Franciscan rule, which many hundreds of communities use today. But the line from the rule that's so similar to that, preach the gospel and use the words if necessary, is this: no brother should preach contrary to the form and regulations of the Holy Church, nor, unless he has been permitted by his minister, all the friars should preach by their deeds. And so we are looking here to orient ourselves, right, and to manifest or to show or to illuminate in ourselves something that's going on, right, that's happened to us, and that should be clear to people. And that's why maybe I got so excited when I listened to Trey and Monica's trip example, because not that preaching and giving people opportunities to listen to words and listen to talks isn't important. Actually, those are some of the most important moments of growth for people. But at this point, a lot of times we don't even get people in the door, and we're inviting people to things, or they have so many barriers in front of them that they don't even want to come to the church, right? So our goal should be to try to find ways to penetrate people's boundaries and barriers. And so part of what my reflection is going to be in the next few minutes is, okay, what are some of those things that are going to pierce through the barrier and are attractive to young people and draw them into a ministry like the outdoors or the Curazzo or something. So the first one I want to talk about is authenticity, right? Again, long quote from a church document, so I want to read the quote from Paul VI there.
It is often said nowadays that the present century thirsts for authenticity. Especially in regard to young people, it is said that they have a horror of the artificial or false, and that they are searching above all for truth and honesty. These signs of the times should find us vigilant, either tacitly or aloud, but always forcefully. We are being asked, do you really believe what you are proclaiming? Do you live what you believe? Do you really preach what you live? The witness of life has become more than ever an essential condition for real effectiveness in preaching. Precisely because of this, we are, to a certain extent, responsible for the progress of the gospel that we proclaim.
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful, very clear statement of what's going on here, right? That I think and this was written more than 40 years ago, right? And yet it's exactly what we're doing here, right? That there is a hunger and desire for the truth and authenticity. And so my next question, and we'll read the next quote, is what does that look like? A lot of times, we might proclaim ourselves Catholic. We might see ourselves as good practicing people. We might really and truly believe what we say we believe. We might actually live it out. We might actually follow all the rules, and we might actually like following all the rules. We might go and do service because we know it's the right thing to do. We might do charity, acts of mercy because we know it's an example of a Catholic, and we might like doing those things. And we seek those things out, but still, we might not know exactly how that looks to other people or how that translates into something actually attractive. And I think a lot of times that step, and that's what we were trying to hint at last night and today, that step is clunky sometimes. We go on a hike with someone and we're like, okay, when is the moment I'm going to talk about Jesus? When is that moment we're going to whip out the Bible? Okay, 15 minutes of walking. I'm not trying to make fun of the example that was similar to this, but I've done this too. 15 minutes of walking, then in silence, then John chapter 3. Okay, John 3:16, and everything will be good, right? And a lot of us know that seems forced or cheesy, right? Like, oh, God so loved the world, okay. And maybe it does hit somebody. I actually heard a story of there's a guy who would always buy NFL tickets to a spot where he would be seen on national TV, and he'd hold up a John 3:16 sign. There's a guy that did that for years and years and years, and apparently some people did ask themselves, what is that? And they looked it up, and whatever. Maybe that's your calling. Generally speaking, that's not how Curazzo works. We're not going to be wearing John 3:16 shirts. and it was hinted at earlier today when we were talking about the trips that you guys came up with too, right? We have to somehow find things that are attractive to people, that draw them in, but don't have that experience of that fakeness to it, right? Or that forcedness to it. But it's like we're talking about the truth, right? Shouldn't we be open? Shouldn't we be proclaiming Jesus Christ and talking about how He's our Savior? And I don't know. What my answer to that, and again, don't quote me on this. Maybe you should. I don't know. Is, would Jesus have done that? Like, I don't know. Did He walk up to people and says, "I'm your Savior. Like, follow me"? I mean, He did in the right context after He had drawn them in, after He had entered into their life, into a relationship with them. And so, really, what I want to focus on now is how do we take this relationship with someone who has so completely changed our life and turn it into a natural and organic way of proclaiming the gospel in our actions. I think Thomas Merton describes that in a pretty profound way in this quote. So, someone else want to read this? Adam, maybe? Go ahead.
It is not true that the saints and the great contemplatives never loved created things and had no understanding or appreciation of the world, with its sights and sounds and the people living in it. They loved everything and everyone. Do you think their love for God was compatible with the hatred for things that reflected Him and spoke of Him on every side? You will say that they were supposed to be absorbed in God and that they had no eyes to see anything but Him. Do you think they walked around with faces like stones and did not listen to the voices of men speaking to them or understand the joys and sorrows of those who were around them? It was because the saints were absorbed in God, they were truly capable of seeing and appreciating created things. And it was because they loved Him alone that they alone loved everybody.
Okay. Right, and again, this is just reiterating a lot of the conversations we've been having, right? It's natural. The saints, the true follower of Christ, the true Christian, right, is the one who can truly love everyone and actually be the most, again, I think I mentioned this yesterday, the most inclusive, the most multicultural, because they understand where it all comes from, where it's all going, the purpose of all of this. And so the first thing we need to do is remove that internal opposition that we might have to a certain way of living or seeing or doing. Again, Pope Francis is maybe a really good example of this. He reaches out to a lot of people that, generally speaking, I can't be associated with that person. Catholic, why not? And he, and maybe in a very public way, and so it's visible to us, and maybe he's trying to set an example through that by leading that way. But each of us need to find a way to incarnate that in our own self, right? That we shouldn't be afraid of things of the world. The only thing, as Christ says, the only thing to be afraid of is he who can kill the soul, right? Like there's, maybe there's bugs and bears and stuff out there, but I'm not afraid of them really. I mean, it's nothing wrong to be afraid of snakes or something, but it's like, but what is there really to be afraid of? Nothing. There's nothing in this created world that there is really to be afraid of. And the saints are the ones that kind of set the way for us. They were the ones that were out there, paving the way. So, what then do we need to do in our own life? How do we translate our own life and make it an act of worship, or a life that's oriented towards God? So I have here a reflection from St. Paul, I think, that starts us on that path. So this is from Galatians 2. For through the law I died to the law, that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if justification comes through the law, then Christ died for nothing. So we've already discussed, right, how what we're trying to portray, what are we trying to show, what are we trying to demonstrate in our life, what are we trying to show others? Ultimately, right, it's Christ. Doesn't mean we lose who we are. We can still keep our, beards and, own styles, and we can keep our own sense of duty and our blue polka dot socks or whatever. So we can still keep those things that are ours, but something in us will be completely transformed and show Christ. And Christ is the most beautiful thing ever, right? We talked about that yesterday, right? The most beautiful thing in the history of the human race was God became man, and then not only that, but he suffered and died and then brought a new life of grace for all men. And so that is what we're trying to show in our life. You're like, well, but don't I have to say that? Don't I have to somehow demonstrate that? Don't I have to tell people that I believe in God? No, somehow by our own life we have to kind of illuminate that and show that. And that's, I guess, where we're starting to walk, how our life becomes a liturgy, or in a way, our life becomes a sacramental experience, right? With a little s, maybe not like a big S, because obviously, right, unless you're a priest, you're not going to be administering the sacraments. Maybe in a few other little cases, like a deacon or so. But in an incarnate way, our life. So a sacrament, right, is the Latin word for mysterion, right? The mystery. Somehow, when someone touches you, they can touch God. That's what a sacrament is, right? A big ass sacrament. When we touch that thing, somehow God is there. Somehow God reaches down and touches us, and we can touch Him. That's what the sacraments are. And so some way you somehow through the life of grace that you're participating in, you now become a sacramental. You now become a mirror, in a way, of the life of God. And so it sounds funny, and it sounds maybe simplistic, but and this is something I think you all probably do well. But make your life, and this is something I thought I thought through some of my own prayer. Make your life something beautiful, right? And I think all of us do that naturally, right? Because we're young people. Because, as we heard from Paul VI, that he's looking at society and seeing us, we want to live authentic lives. And when you live your life authentically and in a beautiful way, you emanate the beauty of Christ, if He is that center of your life. Obviously, I'm implying that you are on this continual journey and seeking Him in your own life, and that you're in a life of prayer and a life of state of grace, and et cetera, et cetera. You guys know all the rules. You guys know what you need to do. More or less. It's a challenge. It's a struggle, right? It's a pilgrimage. But I think sometimes the things that people forget is that they think that somehow, like Merton says, that we need to walk around with eyes of stone and, I'm not looking at that. I'm not looking at that. I need to avoid this. I need to avoid that. Because my life is focused on God now, not the world. Right? That's what I'm talking about. Don't let that false opposition be a distraction for your life. And I think all of you are here and involved with Gratio because you agree with that in the gut level, right? You agree that somehow beauty, all beauty, can bring us back to God. And part of that is you. Part of that is making yourself beautiful, right? But remember that beauty, and we'll get to this in a minute, has multiple aspects. It's not just outward appearance and making my body an idol because I'm a beast and can run up mountains and whatever. But it's also learning to suffer well. I'm sure that's something, if you go close with someone who's not Christian or Catholic, they will notice how you suffer, and it's going to be different than them. I'm sure it goes both ways. But at the same time, we have the key, we have the antidote to suffering, which is Christ Himself. And we actually have to learn to let Him help us. But we have the antidote, we have the key. So if someone sees you suffering well, they're going to learn. They're going to see, wow, what is that? What is that? What makes that work? Why are you happy in the middle of this? So that's kind of the main shell for what I want to talk about. So how I apply that to Creatio. It's going to get super practical, and I just want to go for a few more minutes talking about some practical ways that I think I try to translate that life, liturgy, that attractiveness, that beauty into our work. And we've kind of already hinted at a lot of them. Like Adam kept being the little voice in your guys' ear during the judging, right? How is that going to attract people? How are young adults going to be interested in that? I think that's already hinting at what I'm saying here, right? No one, and I've said this yesterday, no one seriously, again, I'm speaking specifically of someone walking down the street, we have no idea where they are, in their faith life or whatever. No one is initially their gut reaction is, I want to go, on this church hike and just lay my life on the line, right? I'm just going to just open up my heart to God today, and I'm going to walk in the door. Sometimes there's a story like that, great, right? But and unfortunately, though, that's not how most people work. They don't just walk in the door they don't just realize that they have these wounds and these problems and these sufferings and these desires or this hunger for Christ. They don't know that, right? That's why Jesus, the woman at the well, he walks up and's like, give me a drink. And like, I don't know, like maybe that's a bar too, maybe he would have done that in a bar if it was the 21st century, right? Give me a drink, And so we have then to make attractive things. Again, we've talked about this already today. So this is just some ideas that I've compiled over the years. We have to have serious outdoor activities, right? And that's why I got so excited when Trey and Monica came up with that idea, right? Because that's a serious thing. Not that I think any of the other ideas were not good. I like that. There's something that's very me there, very Criazio there, very Christ-like there, because I think he would have been out like checking out the Delta, Hey, let's go out there, I think he would have been out like climbing big mountains. He would go up San Gabriel Peak, every weekend. I don't know. Like he wants to check it out. He wants to see, he's climbing up mountains. He's going out on boats all the time. And so we want it to be a serious activity. And that's why I hope, and that's just, I'm really sharing with you something that I've impulsed a lot through our activities. Yeah, we reach a lot of Catholic young adults and we reach a lot of young adult groups, and that's great. But if I'm going to reach those people that have no idea what we're doing and who we are, or I want to start that deeper conversation, I have to attract them with a real thing. So that's why I like doing backcountry skiing. Like I mentioned earlier, I like taking high school kids or even young college kids in their early years on the hardest possible hike, that I can think of. People are like, oh, you're crazy. And well, maybe a little bit, but I think that, and there's always something here that I've learned over time. This is also from the outdoor industry that I've learned myself. There's a concept called perceived risk and actual risk. And so usually people's perceived risk, for example, I've seen, where was I hiking the other day? Oh, it says Holy Cross, maybe. And if you watch how some people hike, they hike like they know what they're doing. Like I'm walking down the trail. Like I'm comfortable here. And then you see like the girls from Missouri, not to pick on you, or whatever. You're not a good example. You break the mold. You break the mold. Let's just say Missouri. Okay, well, let's choose another state. California. I was kidding. Kansas. The boys. There were some boys from Kansas. And they're like, and every little rock, they're like. And like I'm walking down the trail, trotting by, like, hey guys, see you later. Those guys perceive a much greater risk than there is, right? They think every rock's going to fall and there's going to be a landslide, and they've read too much. They've read too many blogs and watched too much YouTube of rock slides, and so again, this might seem like a big diversion from where we were just a couple of minutes ago talking about Christ, but we have to put people through opportunities and encounters and moments where they have to go beyond themselves and suffer a little bit. One of my favorite things to do when I'm leading a college trip is to make the students suffer. It sounds mean or cruel or whatever, but one of the biggest obstacles that the world presents to itself is self-confidence, that I'm in control of my life, that I have everything figured out, that I'm doing this and it has something in it for me, that I know exactly what I'm getting into, all those kind of phrases. And what's one of the first things that nature can teach us, specifically nature, is that we have no control. And we have no idea what's going to happen. Like this morning, right? Rain or wind or whatever, or rocks or wetness, or we can't be in control of what's going on. And I think that is a fundamental lesson that nature's teaching us. So we have to again, it's like yesterday, it was like the church recommended in that document, we have to let nature speak. We have to listen to it. We're not here to manipulate it or control it or get out of it what we want or just get like a Facebook or Instagram post, Of course, we're taking photos because we need people to look and see what we do, but that's not why we're here, right? We need them to be drawn in, but then we have to let them listen. We have to put them in a situation where they can actually listen to nature and suffer a little bit. And actually enter into some perceived danger, but not real danger, because we don't want to actually hurt anybody. Don't hurt anybody. So I can think of a lot of examples on my own experiences where people have had to overcome some of those boundaries and suffer a little bit, right? So, I have a thought in my mind definitely with college students. I don't know about every trip, but one of the things that has as a recurring theme, and it happened on the hut trip again in the spring. I said, one person on every one of my overnight trips has said, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm like, okay. And I like that, right? I like that because that means they're not just there to get out of it what they can control, but they're there to get something else. Again, it might sound like, oh, is Chris manipulating, or what's he doing here? No. Exactly what I'm doing is using nature and using creation to teach people how grace works, to teach people how reality works, right? Are you in control of your life? Are you complete? Are you happy? Are you in control of the universe? A lot of people think in some way that they are. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. And they don't listen to what's going on around them. So what we need to do, we need to break that down. We need to knock them over. We need to knock down all their bowling pins. I'm sorry. And so one of the best ways we can do that is to remove ourselves from a lot of the things. And I think that's, again, like I said, these are kind of disparate thoughts and lily pads on a lake here, but I think that's where the devil was the most clever on how he's hurting our society today. There's plenty of ideological problems, materialism, but materialism has been a problem before. Relativism has been a problem in the history of mankind. Sure, the Greeks had problems with relativism, right? So, okay, we can go to all the ideological problems. I think one of the biggest problem here has been distraction, period. I think distraction has been the greatest victory of evil in this century, and I'm really concerned at what it's going to do. And I think part of this call for authenticity is drawing people out of that. But I think distraction has been one of the biggest things we can do, and I think that's part of our ministry, right? So when someone has to give up their cell phone for a few days, great. If they feel cold and have to put on a jacket, great, right? Like all the emails I got from some of you, like Elena, I've never been to Denver, like what do I wear? That's great. Like I'm not in control. I don't know what's going to happen. I have to open myself to something greater. No bathrooms or bad bathrooms or outhouses, right? These are all things that remove comforts, right? And obviously Cardinal Ratzinger had that great quote, or Pope Benedict, that we're not made for comfort, right? We're made for greatness. We're made for something greater than ourselves. So we open these moments of vulnerability open us up to the possibility of transcendence, the possibility of a transcendent life. One final thing that I want to just talk about, and then we can enter into a more deeper conversation about this whole weekend, is how do we reach people? And I think you guys already got it today. I don't know if I need to even really go into this, but this is something I like to share with my college outreach kids at CU Boulder who think, okay, if I put this event up on Facebook, we got it, and if I put this up in Instagram or whatever, like this perfect photo, and this trip is going to work. The work of the kingdom, if we want to call it that, which what it is, one of the beautiful names of our evangelization. The work of the kingdom is slow. And the guys, like I said, this is another aspect of that life is liturgy. We have to go one person at a time. And invitation is the key with this. And again, Christ in the City knows this best, right? That you've got to go. It's very, very slow work. You could put up all of the wonderful signs and you could open up all the shelters you want in the world for all the homeless, have all the money, and there still be broken people out there. And they're not going, they're not getting fixed. Why? Because the problem is a human one. It's a problem that goes much deeper than economic and material and social, etc. But it's a human relational problem, right? And that's the same poverty that we're serving on the streets, we serve here in the human soul. And so people enter into, instead of, experiences of communion, and obviously encounter, you guys have heard this a million times probably, people bashing on social media or something, which is not necessarily great always just bash on it, but it's true. There's a lot of people that are out there with a million connections and they're lonely. We know that. Doesn't mean that those things are bad themselves. It just means. And so we have to invite. And so that's just my last thing here, is that when we enter into this outreach, we have to attract, we have to win, we have to build up, and we have to send, right? And that's obviously focus is the same model, right? Win, build, and send. And I think that's really a great understanding of how the Christian life works. We have to win people over. We have to attract them. Trey and Monica and their canoe trip, it might take 5 canoe trips to bring one of those guys to Mass, or but again, we're not in a hurry to bring those guys to Mass, right? Like, it's little by little. It's conversations that are going to happen, but there's a whole world out there that is lacking the mercy and grace of God, and there is a kind of urgency to this whole thing. So we have to invite and have a sense of invitation. And so I like to organize in my mind. I like to think in concentric circles, like, okay, who are the leaders of this group? Who can I reach? If I can reach the leaders of this group of people, then I can help them, and then they can reach other people, and that's how we should think, guys. We should think as evangelists and apostles. Okay, well, I don't know. I have just lots of other random thoughts, like, that you guys get this. I don't have to get into it. Like, don't become ghetto kind of mentality. Like, let's make our little cool group and like, let's just go do our thing and just become another. I mean, we heard this more than you realize, right? Don't become just an upper room Catholics. And we've heard it a million times, but we really have to do that. And I think, so for ourselves, that means breaking down some of those misconceptions about how we see the world and how we judge other people. Again, and I think a key has been kind of uniting this whole weekend is beauty, right? Beauty. We find something beautiful in someone else because we can look at them as Christ does, and he sat with sinners and tax collectors and was completely fine with them. But he wasn't fine with their sins. That's fine. But he didn't immediately like, hey, dude, like, stop hooking up with a neighbor or whatever. Like, I don't know what he would say in those dinners. I really would love to be there and see what he said when he sat with the tax collectors. I don't know. Maybe he just joked around. He talked about, the Romans that week, or how they were doing, or like, I don't know what he did, But he obviously didn't push them away, or who won the camel race or something. I don't know. But like, I don't know. It's like, but he found a way, and that's what we have to do. We have to make our lives a reflection of him who has changed us, and he, as the most beautiful thing, has so inflamed us and in a sense infected our life that it's transmitted in everything we do. Yeah, there's just 2 more quotes there. One more quote about showing through example. Okay, well, that's really this reflection. I have some other random thoughts, but I don't know if they apply. So, yeah, that's it. I want now to enter into kind of conversation. These are hopefully meant to be kind of conversation starter.